Hi, I'm Michael Goodson, and I'm the Chief Curator and Director of Programs at the Contemporary Dayton. We are currently showing Mary Reid Kelley and Patrick Kelley. It's kind of a version of a project that originated at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia. It was the more expansive exhibition there was called Blood Moon. Um, our distilled version is called Night Kitchen. It involves two sculptures in an adjacent gallery, and then in our video theater, one of the two videos produced for the Fabric Workshop. The video is called I'm Jackson Pollock. Um, and I guess I'll start there. First of all, Mary Reid and Patrick Kelley have been making incredible museum shows, probably more museum shows than about any other artist I can think of. You guys are you're the kings of museum shows in a funny way,
For the Jackson
including
Pollock Museum.
Yeah, with the Jackson Pollock Museum.
and well, it's an interesting trajectory that seems a little different than a lot of gallery artists to me anyway. But it's, I think, befitting the tenor of the work. It seems to fit better in the context of a museum, whatever their trajectory might be, than the cacophony of a gallery that changes a show out every month or something like that. So Mary Reid and Patrick Kelley have been doing museum exhibitions all over America and all over the world for the past 10 years, easily more. To be honest with you, my first real introduction to your work was This Is Awful, which I saw at Art Basel. I mean, I had been familiar with the work before that, but I had never actually been immersed in the theater of the work, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
And This Is Awful really, it was my touchstone and my escape from the rest of the art fair, which when I'm at an art fair, I need to escape constantly.
Mhm.
I have kind of this agoraphobic response to all those ideas at once. And your film, and actually Sarah Swinar's film, really were it almost became the point of the trip for me.
Mhm.
And I've actually shown both. We showed soft film about 4 months ago and had a conversation with Sarah. And I showed This Is Awful at the Wexner Center for the Arts, I think about 3 or 4 years ago.
Mhm.
Welcome, Mary Reid Kelley and Patrick Kelley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to actually start with the two films, really, and the environment that was created for the Fabric Workshop. But the two films, for me, seemed slightly different in tone. And I think I was thinking on the way over here that it could be distilled down to, just in terms of appearance, this kind of tabula rasa in which the narratives take place, as opposed to this very complicated or very built set, or in some cases, a set that is a post-production, the result of post-production imagery. And I'm kind of curious if I could start with that idea of why this film looks that way. These two films look that way as opposed to the earlier works.
Yeah. So when we began our collaboration with the Fabric Workshop, there's a lot of factors in it, and the pandemic being one big one.
Yeah.
But this collaboration, of course, was necessarily made long distance. We weren't on site with them, which is typically what would happen in a Fabric Workshop situation. But when we started to give them basically assignments for things to make for us, right? The pumpkins.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we were shipping things back and forth because necessarily we were working remotely. And when we received the first kind of batch of props, there were film props for us to use. It it was kind of this jarring event of like, okay, we didn't make these. we sort of instructed on how to make them and what we wanted. And I think that was the beginning of kind of a acceptance on our part to sort of realize, okay, we're going to be responding in terms of our design from here on out to these objects and the things they're helping us with, which is new for us.
Yeah.
And that something about the props led us to think we kind of want to pare everything down in terms of the frame of the video.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so like some of the, like when we say props, I think some of the things that we responded most to were they made us these beautiful costumes that we collaborated with them on the design, went back and forth, we had like a Zoom measuring party, where I had to measure myself with them on Zoom, and luckily there's no video of that. And like also they developed, we wanted to have these pumpkin heads, which is kind of, pumpkins are kind of a theme through that show and through our show with you. And they sent us the first models of the pumpkins that I could wear on my head. And these were unpainted because I would paint them here. But when we got the costumes, there's just like a beautiful dress, some overalls, the suit that is the character's wearing, who's the main character, and I'm Jackson Pollock. They were just, of course, it's the Fabric Workshop. They were beautifully done and really expressive. And the pumpkin itself was like, we felt that they were signaling so strongly who the characters were that we could take a risk with the backgrounds and shift from our more established mode of just basically packing the sets full of material, because a lot of the time what we're doing when we build a set is to signal, it signals along with the costume. It works in concert with the costume to signal where we are, when we are, who are we watching. And this kind of helps the films, which are very short, get off to this start, like a strong start, where you have as much information as we can possibly give you as a viewer. Anyways, when we got these really articulated costumes and the idea of, basically the pumpkin head is to signal that these aren't really humans, that's like the main query of the piece is like, what is a human? We really just felt like we didn't need like a super elaborate set.
Yeah, and that combined with, it's one thing to feel like we didn't need a set, but then the end look that we realized we wanted was this very theatrically removed space. So in the middle of blackness.
For me, it worked really well, and it was when I was at the Fabric Workshop when you were installing. Although I'm sure that you weren't there. I just talked to the crew there, and then made sure to come back. I think it was a few weeks after the show opened, and I was in Philly visiting other artists, and went to see the show, and then was really fascinated by how the deprivation of set building and generated scenery kind of pushed all the language and the characterizations to the fore.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was also fascinating to think about that happening in tandem with this idea of the pumpkin, which is arguably the most anthropomorphized gourd. Anyway, but there are so many other layers there as well, including this idea, the very human idea of an almost antiquated idea of the harvest. We're so far away from that idea. And then of mice and men, which is predicated on the labor of the harvest. And it gets into this idea of how human all that labor is.
Yeah.
And which acts as a liminal device into how humans interact with one another, generally speaking. And in the film we're showing, I'm Jackson Pollock, it's full of humans. It's this duality between everyone from Hubie Blake and Tacita Dean with kind of pathologies of humanity, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it justice. You'll have to see the video to know what I'm talking about, but it's a litany of this in a very simple rhyme scheme for about 15 minutes. And so when you say that it was about being human, I've not yet applied that language to it, but it makes perfect sense to me. And I'm curious what that process was like for you. I mean, if it's different than, say, earlier works, including Awful and The Syphilis of Sisyphus, and works that people might know.
Well, I think that whatever we end up carrying forward as the outward theme of the piece, it's always very much responding to like we make it with open floodgates to whatever is going on. Mm-hmm. And we try not to police what comes in and out of the piece. We kind of, I think, both have this unspoken rule that like whatever we feel is right goes in, and we don't like try to deconstruct the reasoning until we're done making it. And so because I think you can like second guess yourself as an artist, and if you just kind of let it come out and accept what it is and just do what's best for the piece and trust your process, then you do have these connections. I mean, like Sisyphus, for example, that was 2011. You know, the thing that was going on then was Tahrir Square. And also like, you know, Obama, we had a couple years of Obama, and like starting to think, well, maybe we're not going to get, you know, healthcare, and like feeling disappointed, like getting your hopes up high and then having your hopes crushed, and like what bitterness does. And Sisyphus is really, it's an embittered voice. And so it was kind of like a film about political and aesthetic disappointment and like where to go once you've been crushed. And so, you know, obviously the pandemic is behind the pieces that we did for Fabric Workshop and that you're showing. And like, so we were thrown very much back onto like extremely basic questions, like what is a person? What's precious? What makes you cling to life? And specifically in I'm Jackson Pollock, I feel like it was all of the people that are cited in I'm Jackson Pollock are artists. That's the one thing they have in common. They're all different types of artists, pop artists, novelists, lots and lots of visual artists, dead, alive, but they're all artists. And because I think that just like so many people, that's something that really kept us going was like I went through this big like dad rock and roll phase, and I was like listening to the Rolling Stones and the Lou Reed and to Bob Dylan, and like I like even like with the role that John Steinbeck and also Edgar Allan Poe is a major figure behind the text of these two pieces. Like I felt like I was falling back on things that were like very, very familiar, things that I had that like reminded me of like my emotional history, and just kind of like it's a way of like checking in and saying, you're still here. This you have this emotional history. And so in Jackson Pollock, it's kind of just a litany of some people who are very famous, some people who very few people will know, it is kind of a litany of people that I'm hoping will touch upon a viewer's own sense. I am hoping that the viewer will hear some of their own faves, like we were constantly checking in with our heroes and our faves over the pandemic, just to be reminded of that emotional presence.
Yeah, it was an interesting mixture of what I would call high and low. Although for me, it's all high. I would say that all of these people represent in one way or the other the pinnacle of whatever it is they do. So I'm particularly fond of the fact that MF Doom, Alice Cooper, I think it's Cool Keith, I could be wrong about that, and Iggy Pop all are sort of mixed in with Anselm Kiefer and Tacita Dean. And what's been interesting for me, and the thing I wish I had thought about a lot earlier, was to sort of maybe offer something programmatic where if you can come in and list every reference and somehow give me a sentence for every person that was there, you win some.
The visitors. Yeah.
Oh, the visitor. Oh, yeah, that would be great.
That'd be great.
I was really proud to say that on first or second listen when the film arrived, which was when I could really spend time with it, I think I was hitting maybe 80%. There were a couple that a few that I had to go back, but at this point I know it. I know every reference, and what I really am fascinated by, and this reminds me a little bit of all things of kind of Eminem's interior rhyme schemes, which are really based on reference points within larger swaths of rhyming, is that there'll be these couplets or sometimes troikas of polarities that make sense together. So there are these little interior structures within the thing. And I'm curious as to how laborious that was for you.
Well, so, okay, Michael, I feel like I should recite for people who are listening just a couple lines from.
I would love that.
in case somebody doesn't know what we're talking about, and it's so you'll get the trick very quickly. So I'll read a couple lines from the beginning of the film. I'm the Jackson Pollock of service
to Moloch. I'm the Nat King Cole of selling your soul. I'm the Maria Tall Chief of climate grief. I'm the Mae West of the Trinity Test. I'm the Robert Oppenheimer of social climbers. I'm the Richard Prince of the Platinum Rinse. I'm the Art Crumb of going numb. I'm the John Keats of oppressing your streets. I'm the Ibrahim Ferrer of the war on terror. I'm the Foxy Brown of Black Hawk Down. I'm the Noble Sissel of buying this missile. I'm the Eubie Blake of being on the take.
So, and that is the entirety of the film. I think there's like 150
in groups of what, like
14. Well,
actually, I'm the Mae West of the Trinity Test is the first interior structure. It leads to two, I think one or two other rhymes that are related to one another in a really smart way.
The next one after that is I'm the Mae West of the Trinity Test. I'm the Robert Oppenheimer of social climbers. I'm the Richard Prince of the Platinum Rinse. And so, yeah, you like the whole Platinum and Mae West and the Trinity Test and Robert Oppenheimer. Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the fun of, like, I kind of, when I was writing, I was just, it was just names, and then kind of dumping it all out. And
physically, actually, as little clips.
Yeah.
I mean, Mary had basically a large layout of cutouts. I mean,
like
kind of like a cut-up poem. Like, where you're sort of arranging them and deciding what the clusters would be.
Yeah. So you're right. They're not monads. There is usually some reason for them to be together. each, I think there's like 13 little segments, and each segment has 14 lines, and that's how many lines as is usually in a sonnet. And so in a sonnet, of course, it's a short poem, but it's long enough so you get this kind of proposal, counter-proposal, and synthesis. And so that's a little bit of what I was thinking about as like an emotional goal within the 14 lines. Is it does build up to something. Like it, and your brain kind of, like the, brains are so amazing. Like you hear like two of these lines and you know all of the rules, and so your brain like kicks into like meaning making mode. And I feel like so much of like our filmmaking is like, we really want to tap into like the meaning factory of people's brains, and just like people's incredible facility with language, and like the brain just like, it's like, I like to play with words. We like to make physical jokes, but really it happens in the listener's brains. Like it really is a collaborative thing. If there's a joke in the script and it goes by, it's almost like it's not there. If you don't hear it, if the tree falls in the woods and nobody laughs, it really isn't there. And so, yeah, kind of.
What's funny is that there's a measurable percentage of people that have been coming to the gallery that have, I think, although I didn't discover the 14-line math, and but what occurred to me was that as the language goes, this seems like the set itself more pared down than some of the language in the works. In the earlier works, which is incredibly complicated in terms of, and worked. It's worked like a painting is worked. It's in my estimation, there's a kind of resolution in the way the language finally appears in the work. But there have been people that have been coming back and coming back and coming back. So I guess there's a certain kind of person that has that latches on to these rhythms. And I would say it's like 7 people that have been coming back and coming back and coming back, and I think they're trying to figure out what it is that they're seeing. And I actually talked to one of them last week, and I asked her, and she actually teaches at OSU, and I was asking her, first of all, that's a long journey to have come back 3 times to see this. And but she was basically like, I'm just trying to figure the whole thing out. And then I think her goal was to apply it to understanding the world that she's amid at this moment, which seems to be the point of the film, generally speaking. So it was kind of fascinating for me to see that this small group to which the structures have communicated, if you will. Also, I actually really love the fact that the props, like the language, have kind of come to the fore in these 2 kind of pared down films. There's something about the stool with the phone and that very small chair and I'm Jackson Pollock that are funny and tender and utterly dysfunctional. Dysfunction seems to be an ongoing idea in I'm Jackson Pollock, this idea that, the pumpkins start to accumulate on your body in a way that makes you less able to, for instance, use the phone.
Exactly, yeah.
We were trying to find those moments when we were shooting. Definitely.
Yeah, I love it when you're kind of pounding on the phone with the pumpkin. It makes somehow that makes perfect sense to me, and I can relate it to my somehow. So I we are presenting also 2 of the sculpture that were at the Fabric Workshop, which have also been really fascinating to me. And I think the original idea was I think because I love it so much to show this is awful again, but show it with the tableau, which I really love. There's something about that hacksaw on the table that I think about all the time. and then it was suggested, no, why don't we show something new? But the totemic sculpture that came from the fabric workshop seemed utterly different than other tableau items that have been adjacent to or inspired the films before. And I'm curious if that's this thing that you had described about the fabrication being this collaborative process during a time of separation.
I mean, that part of that is just because we knew we'd be making things that, in addition to what you see in the Blood Moon video and the Jackson Pollock video, there are things that we wouldn't actually use in the film, and that would be things that would exist in their own right as objects, but have some kind of formal conceptual relationship to the objects and the characters in the film. So it's kind of came out of this way of thinking about these sculptural objects started a while ago with other works. At one point existing as almost figure replacement sculptures where they were sort of stand-in, like kind of totemics.
And we started putting videos in them.
Yeah, and we started having these screens embedded in them so that they would have some sort of ambient context that relates to the broader context.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we wanted for this, is to have this sort of fleshing out of the moon and a kind of absurd representations of the moon in the form of these animations.
Yeah, the sculptures are really beautiful, and I think people have been fascinated. I think they're not used to seeing even totemic sculptures that have a video element in them. It's been a really interesting experience for a lot of people. And we actually developed the theater to the point where the gallery in which those two objects are exhibited, we built a false floor so that we could quite literally run all the power and cable through the floor and into a power outlet in the video room, so it's completely disappeared. And we were able to kind of create the same dark environment that was created at the fabric workshop, although our floor is just painted this kind of dark gray that will accept traffic a little better than the dark of the walls. But people there's this shift, especially if they've been familiar with the gallery, there's this shift that occurs and people are absolutely fascinated with the theater of it, and which is a carryover from the fabric workshop, and just the two floors of theater there were fascinating to me, and I'm sure it was an arduous process to do this during COVID and do it remotely, and I love the distillation of it. And I will tell you that the Fabric Workshop folks have been great, up to and including sending us the blue gels. So the thing is lit. It really is taking as many of the theatrical ideas from the Fabric Workshop. And
that was such a satisfying thing when we were working with the lighting designer, and we realized, I've forgotten his name. Do you remember his name? We realized that we could make this, the whole tone of the space, including the lighting, could all work together in the way that we wanted, because if you remember from the second floor, it really is sort of an immersive thing. And so I'm really glad that you could kind of recreate some of that, because we really liked this idea of having a whole kind of overarching tone to the whole exhibition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and if the more time you spend with it, the more it imparts, which is kind of it's not the most common thing in contemporary art. I would argue contemporary art can be pretty fast, and this it sort of imparts things depending on how much time you give it. And I would say up to and including the sculptures, which are really complex. So as they're set up in the space, you have to sort of see them in the round to understand that there are videos on both sides of at least Night Kitchen, that totemic sculpture. But people have been, just so you know, really fascinated with the installation, and I think it's been a really interesting introduction to your work for them. I've spent a lot of time explaining to very puzzled people what it is that they're, or attempting to explain what it is that they're seeing, up to and including showing them earlier works on my phone. And it's been a really great experience, and we appreciate your willingness to show this work and share this work with us.
Thank you. Yeah. It's actually really cool to get to show in the Midwest. We haven't shown in the Midwest much, and Pat's, you know, you're a native of the Minnesota, and so it's cool. I mean, I guess one thing about the sculptures that was really fun for us to consider that's different from making the films is, you know, the films are very fast paced. It's like standing under a waterfall. You can't possibly get everything at once. So they really are meant to, you know, to watch 2 or 3 times. And if you really want to like catch everything, and, but it is kind of an intense experience. And so we've also enjoyed with the sculptures, like having a chance to make a more contemplative work. That's just like a different type of brainwave.
Yeah, and that doesn't have a timeline. It's just, it's kind of an ambient thing.
Yeah.